The night sky was quiet above the green valley until a sudden streak of light cut through the clouds. It was not a falling star but a small alien ship, breaking apart as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Pieces of burning metal scattered across the trees. The crash sent a long echo through the hills, waking the birds and shaking the ground. When the dust settled, smoke rose from the wreckage. Inside the broken ship, a faint sound came from the shadows. It was the soft cry of an infant. Rila, the alien mother, slowly opened her eyes. Her body ached from the crash. The air smelled like smoke and burned metal. The walls of the ship had split open, letting in the cool wind of the valley night. She tried to move, but pain shot through her leg. Still, she pushed herself up. Her first thought was not about the ship or her injuries. It was about her baby. She turned her head and saw a small shape wrapped in silver cloth lying beside her seat. The baby was crying weakly. Relief mixed with fear as she reached out, pulling the child close to her chest. The world outside was strange to her eyes. She had never seen a planet like this before. Her people, the Nasari, rarely left their own worlds. They believed humans were dangerous and cold, beings who cared only for machines and power. Rila had heard those stories all her life. But now, far from home, she had no choice but to land on a human colony world. Her ship had been damaged by a storm in space, and when the systems failed, this planet was the only place she could reach. The baby whimpered again, and Rila whispered soft words in her native tongue. Her leg was bleeding and one of her arms felt broken. She needed help but feared what kind of beings lived here. As the night grew darker, she tried to drag herself and her baby out of the wreckage. Her mind told her to hide. Her heart told her to protect her child at any cost. Not far from the crash site, a human named Tom was checking his equipment. He lived alone in the valley, working as a mechanic for the colony's research outpost. He often stayed in his small metal shelter at the valley's edge, far from the noise of the city. He liked quiet places and simple work. That night, he was fixing one of the drones when he saw a flash in the sky. At first he thought it was a meteor, but when he saw the explosion and the smoke, he knew something had gone wrong. Tom grabbed his flashlight, a small med kit, and his scanner. He started walking toward the crash. The air smelled of burned fuel as he reached the valley center. He saw the broken ship glowing faintly under the moonlight. It was not human design. The surface was smooth and silver, shaped like flowing water. He felt both fear and wonder. This was the first time he had seen an alien craft up close. When he moved closer, he heard a sound. It was faint but clear, a cry. His heart tightened. It was not a machine. It was alive. Tom raised his light and looked through a crack in the ship's hull. Inside, he saw movement. A shape leaned over another, holding something small. For a moment, he froze. Then he realized it was an alien woman, hurt and trying to protect her child. Rila saw the beam of light first. Her instincts screamed danger. She pulled her baby closer and hissed softly, warning the stranger to stay away. The stories about humans filled her mind. She had been told they took what they wanted and destroyed what they could not understand. She expected the man to raise a weapon, but instead Tom slowly knelt down outside the wreckage. He placed his flashlight on the ground, letting the light fall softly so it would not blind her. He spoke in a calm voice, slow and gentle. She could not understand all his words, but the tone was not threatening. He said he wanted to help. He lifted the med kit so she could see it and then set it down in front of him. Then he stepped back. His movements were careful, showing that he meant no harm. Rila stared at him in confusion. No human should act like that, she thought. He should have taken her prisoner or called for others. But this man only waited, looking concerned. Her leg throbbed and she knew she could not move far. The baby's breathing was weak. She hesitated for a long time before she finally nodded, pointing at her injured leg. Tom moved slowly, crawling forward through the wreckage. He saw the wound and frowned. It was deep, but he could treat it. He took out a spray bandage and a pain patch. Rila flinched when the cold spray touched her skin, but then she felt the pain lessen. Tom worked silently, careful not to touch her more than necessary. He cleaned the cut, sealed it, and checked her pulse. The alien skin was slightly silver in color, soft and cool under the light. He looked at the baby next, wrapped in cloth and breathing unevenly. The baby was small, with bright blue eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. Tom smiled, amazed. He took a small thermal blanket from his pack and handed it to Rila. She accepted it slowly, wrapping her child again. For the first time, she looked at the human without fear. The night grew colder. Tom stood up and pointed toward his shelter in the distance. He made a gesture as if to ask her to follow. Rila understood part of it but hesitated. Leaving the ship felt wrong, but staying could be deadly. Her systems were dead and the air filters were damaged. She had to choose between fear and survival. At last she gave a small nod. Tom smiled, relieved. He picked up his flashlight and offered his arm to help her walk. She refused the touch but allowed him to carry her emergency bag. The baby made a soft sound as they stepped into the night. The walk was slow. The ground was rough and Rila leaned on a piece of metal as a cane. Tom kept his light low so it would not hurt her eyes. He stayed a few steps ahead, checking the path. Every sound of the forest made Rila's heart race. She had never been on a planet with such open space. Her world was filled with glass cities and quiet air. This place was alive with insects, wind, and strange smells. When they reached the shelter, Tom opened the door and stepped aside. The inside was simple but warm. There was a small heater, a workbench, and a few storage boxes. Rila entered slowly, still holding her child close. She looked around, unsure. Tom closed the door and placed a small bowl of clean water near her. Then he prepared a light soup from his supplies. The scent of cooked food filled the small room. Rila's stomach tightened with hunger. She had not eaten since the crash. Tom handed her a cup carefully. She sniffed it first, then took a slow sip. The warmth spread through her chest. She did not know the taste, but it felt safe. Her baby began to cry again, and she looked down with worry. Tom reached into a drawer and took out a small container of purified water. He filled a soft bottle and handed it to her, pointing at the baby. She hesitated, but then tried it. The child drank quietly. The moment made her shoulders relax for the first time since the crash. Tom sat on the floor across the room, not wanting to frighten her. He opened his notebook and began sketching the design of her ship, trying to understand the alien technology. Every now and then he looked up and saw Rila watching him carefully. Her eyes were bright and sharp, but no longer full of fear. When the baby finally fell asleep, Rila placed the small bundle beside her and leaned against the wall. Her body was exhausted. She wanted to stay awake to keep watch, but her eyelids grew heavy. Before she closed her eyes, she looked at Tom one last time. He was sitting by the heater, checking his tools. The light from the fire softened his face. He looked tired but peaceful. Rila had been taught to fear humans, yet this one had saved her life and her baby's. She did not understand his reasons. Maybe he was different from the stories. Maybe the stories were wrong. Her last thought before sleep was a strange one for a Nasari. She felt safe near a human. Outside, the wind moved through the valley, carrying away the smoke of the crash. The broken ship lay silent, and the night grew still again. Inside the small shelter, the faint sound of the sleeping baby was the only sign of life. And so, under the same stars that had watched them both crash and meet, two beings from different worlds rested side by side in peace, unaware that their meeting would soon change everything. Morning light entered the small metal shelter through a narrow window. The valley outside was quiet except for the soft sound of birds. Inside, Rila opened her eyes slowly. For a moment, she did not know where she was. Then she remembered the crash, the human who helped her and the baby sleeping safely beside her. The air inside was warm. She turned her head and saw Tom near the workbench fixing a small metal drone. He looked focused, his hand steady and careful. Rila sat up slowly, her injured leg still aching. The baby stirred in her arms, making a soft sound. Tom turned around when he heard it. His face brightened with a small smile, and he raised one hand in greeting. She did not know his words, but she understood his friendly tone. He pointed toward a pot on the heater and then toward her, inviting her to eat. Rila hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She tried to stand, but pain ran through her leg again. Tom noticed it and quickly walked over. He offered his arm to help her, moving slowly so she would not be afraid. She accepted his help this time. His touch was warm and firm, and for the first time she did not feel the need to pull away. He guided her to a small chair beside the heater. The smell of food filled the room. It was a simple soup made from plants and roots that grew in the valley. Tom poured some into a bowl and handed it to her. She took a sip and felt warmth spread through her body. The taste was new to her, but pleasant. Her baby cooed softly in her arms, watching the steam rise from the bowl. Tom knelt down to check her leg. The bandage he had placed last night was holding well. He changed it carefully, cleaning the wound again. Rila watched him closely. The human's movements were gentle, almost respectful. He spoke quietly as he worked, saying things she could not understand but that sounded calm. When he was done, he gave a small nod, proud of his work. Rila looked at him for a long moment. The stories of her people painted humans as cold and greedy, but this man seemed to care about a stranger without asking anything in return. She could not understand why. She wanted to ask his name, but she did not know the human words. So she placed her hand on her chest and said, "Rila." Tom looked surprised, then smiled and pointed to himself. "Tom," he said slowly. She repeated it softly. "Tom," he nodded, pleased. It was a small exchange, but for both of them, it felt important. After they finished eating, Tom went outside to collect parts from the wrecked ship. Rila sat by the door, holding her baby and watching him work. The morning sun touched the valley with gold light. The human moved with steady steps, lifting heavy pieces of metal and sorting them into piles. He was trying to save what could still be used. Sometimes he looked up and gave her a short wave to show he was fine. Rila noticed how he respected the wreckage. He did not try to take her ship apart for greed. He worked carefully as if he knew it meant something to her. When he returned, he carried a small energy core that was cracked but not useless. He placed it on the table and pointed to her broken communicator. She understood that he wanted to fix it. For hours, Tom worked on the device while Rila watched. The baby slept peacefully beside her. Occasionally, Tom asked her something by pointing or making gestures, and she responded the same way. It became a quiet language of signs and looks, yet they understood each other better than words could explain. When the sun began to set, the communicator finally made a faint sound. Rila gasped softly, eyes wide with hope. Tom smiled, proud of the small success. The device was not ready to send messages yet, but it was alive again. Rila pressed her hand to her chest in gratitude. She wished she knew the human words for thank you, but instead she simply smiled. That was enough. That night, Tom cooked again. This time, he offered her a piece of bread made from the colony's grain. She shared a few pieces of dried fruit from her own supply, and they ate together in silence. The baby slept in a small basket Tom had made from fabric and wire. It was simple but soft and safe. As they ate, Rila studied Tom's face in the firelight. His eyes looked kind, but there was sadness behind them. She wondered if he was alone because he wanted peace or because he had lost something. Humans, she thought, were not so different from the Nasari. They could feel pain, hope, and kindness. Maybe the stories her people told were only half true. After dinner, Tom took a thin blanket and placed it over Rila's shoulders. She looked at him with surprise. He smiled, then pointed toward the heater, telling her to stay warm. When he turned away, Rila looked down at the blanket. It was rough but warm. She felt something she had not felt since leaving her world. Safety. The days passed slowly. Rila's leg healed bit by bit. Tom continued repairing the communicator and checking the wreckage for more parts. Each day they learned more about each other's ways without needing to speak the same language. When Tom worked, Rila helped by cleaning small parts and sorting them by size. She watched how carefully he handled her alien tools, never breaking or discarding anything. He treated every piece as if it had meaning. One morning, Tom showed her the inside of one of his small drones. It was a round machine that floated on a low hum. Rila's eyes widened in wonder. The design was simple but clever. She pointed to a few damaged wires and offered a better way to connect them using her own repair tools. Together they fixed the drone, and when it lifted smoothly into the air, both of them smiled like children. Their quiet teamwork built a bridge between them. Rila began to see that Tom's kindness was not an act, but his nature. When the baby cried, he would hand her clean water or help warm the blanket. Sometimes he would hum a soft tune while he worked, and the baby would stop crying to listen. It was strange to Rila how the sound of a human voice could calm her child. One evening, rain began to fall outside. The sound echoed on the metal roof like gentle drumming. Rila sat near the heater, holding her baby close. Tom placed a small container outside to collect rainwater and then sat down near her. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The room was filled with the sound of rain and the soft breathing of the sleeping infant. Tom opened a small book from his shelf and began to draw. He sketched the valley, the shelter, and then carefully Rila and her baby sitting near the fire. When he was done, he showed her the drawing. Rila's eyes softened. She touched the page gently, moved by how he had captured the peace of the moment. She pointed at the picture and then at her heart, a silent way of saying thank you. Later that night, while Tom slept, Rila stayed awake. The heater's light flickered softly. She looked at her baby and then at the human resting on the floor. The stories her elders told echoed in her mind again. They said humans were heartless and cruel, but now she had seen the truth with her own eyes. She realized something that both frightened and comforted her. Kindness existed even among those her people feared. The next morning, the storm had passed. The valley was covered in mist. Tom was outside checking the wreckage again. Rila stepped out of the shelter for the first time since the crash. The air was fresh and cool. The green valley stretched wide before her, beautiful and alive. She had never seen such open beauty before. Tom looked up and smiled when he saw her standing. Her leg was strong enough to walk a little now. He pointed to the hills and said something she could not understand, but his tone sounded cheerful, like he was happy she could move again. She smiled back, and for a brief moment it felt like they had been friends for years. That evening, Tom finally managed to restore the communicator completely. A soft blue light blinked on its surface and a signal icon appeared. Rila felt tears rise in her eyes. She could call her people now. She would be rescued soon. Yet as she looked at Tom, standing beside her with the same quiet smile, she felt a strange ache in her chest. She realized that she did not want to leave so quickly. The baby slept peacefully in the new basket Tom had built. The human sat quietly beside the heater, his eyes thoughtful. Rila looked at the small machine that now connected her to the stars, then back at the man who had shown her compassion when she needed it most. She understood that what happened between them would never be forgotten, no matter what world she returned to. As night came again, Rila watched the flames flicker. Her baby dreamed without fear. The sound of the valley outside was calm, and somewhere deep in her heart, Rila knew that this place, this quiet shelter and the human within it had already become part of her story forever. The next morning began quietly. A soft wind passed through the valley and touched the metal roof of Tom's shelter. The sun rose behind the hills, painting the sky with warm colors. Inside, Rila sat near the heater, holding her baby while Tom prepared breakfast. The small shelter felt almost peaceful now, like a safe home far from war or fear. Rila had started to understand a few human words. She could recognize when Tom said food, warm, or safe. Tom also learned a few sounds from her language. When he tried to speak, his accent was strange, but the effort made her smile. They had built a bridge of simple sounds and gestures, a quiet way of speaking that came from patience and care. After breakfast, Tom stepped outside to check the signal from Rila's repaired communicator. He hoped her people would pick it up soon. He had sent the message 3 times already, but no reply had come. The communicator blinked with a soft light, meaning the signal was still traveling. He looked up at the sky, wondering what kind of world she came from. Somewhere out there, an entire civilization must be waiting for her return. Inside the shelter, Rila watched him through the small window. Her baby was awake now, making soft sounds and waving tiny hands. Rila smiled gently. The baby's eyes, bright and clear, looked curious about everything. She whispered in her language, telling the child about the stars, about home, and about the kind human who had saved them. Suddenly, the baby began to cry. Rila tried to calm the child, rocking back and forth, whispering softly, but her strength was still weak. The wound in her leg hurt again, and her hands trembled. The crying grew louder. She looked toward the door, hoping Tom would return soon. A moment later, he came inside carrying a small container of clean water. Tom placed the container on the table and looked at her with concern. He could see she was struggling. He stepped closer, pointing to the baby and then to himself, asking silently if he could help. Rila's heart raced. The idea of letting a human hold her child went against everything she had been taught. But the baby was crying harder, and her arms felt heavy. Tom waited patiently, his hands open and calm. His face showed no impatience, only quiet kindness. Rila looked down at her baby, then back at him. The baby's cries echoed in the small room, breaking her heart. After a long hesitation, she took a deep breath and slowly held out the child toward him. Tom stepped forward carefully and took the baby into his arms. His movements were gentle, as if he was holding something precious and fragile. The baby continued to cry for a few seconds, then began to calm as Tom rocked slowly, humming a low tune. His voice was soft and steady. The tune had no words, just a simple rhythm that filled the room with peace. Rila watched in silence, her eyes wide with surprise. The baby stopped crying completely and soon fell asleep against Tom's chest. The human smiled faintly, looking down at the small bundle resting peacefully. It was a sight Rila had never imagined seeing. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Tom carried the baby to the small basket and laid it down gently. Then he turned to Rila and nodded as if saying everything was fine. Rila's throat felt tight. She wanted to say something, but no words came. She simply placed her hand over her heart in gratitude. Tom understood the gesture and smiled again. Later that day, Rila sat by the door, watching Tom repair one of his drones. The small machine floated above his hands as he adjusted its sensors. She found herself admiring the focus in his eyes. He looked calm and sure, as if every small problem had a solution waiting to be found. She thought about how he had handled her baby, and something inside her heart changed. The fear she carried since the crash began to fade. When the sun was high, Rila decided to step outside. Her leg had healed enough to let her walk short distances. Tom noticed and quickly brought a walking stick he had made from metal and wood. She took it with a small nod of thanks. The ground outside was soft and full of life. She looked around at the wide valley, the tall trees, and the shining river nearby. Her eyes filled with wonder. Her world had no places like this. Tom stood beside her, pointing at the river and saying the word water. Rila repeated it slowly. He smiled and nodded, pleased. Then she pointed to the sky and said the word for star in her own language. Tom repeated it with effort, making her laugh softly. It was the first time he had heard her laugh, and the sound made him pause for a moment. It was soft and musical, carrying warmth that reached him even without words. They walked slowly to the river's edge. Tom filled a small bottle with water, showing her how pure it was. She dipped her fingers into it, feeling the cool touch. The baby was sleeping back in the shelter, wrapped safely in a blanket. For the first time since the crash, Rila felt calm enough to enjoy the world around her. A group of small animals appeared near the river, drinking quietly. Rila pointed at them, curious. Tom explained their names using short words and gestures. She tried to repeat them, laughing when she got the sounds wrong. The scene felt simple and peaceful. For that moment, they were not human and alien. They were just two beings sharing the same planet. When they returned to the shelter, the communicator blinked with a new color. Rila hurried to it, her heart racing. Tom followed, curious. She pressed the button and a soft voice came through. It spoke in her language, weak but clear. It was a signal from a nearby Nasari ship searching for survivors. Tears filled her eyes. Her people had received her message. She was not lost anymore. Tom saw the emotion on her face and understood even without knowing the words. He smiled gently, glad that she was found. Rila turned to him, trying to explain. She pointed to the communicator, then to the sky, then made a gesture of a ship landing. Tom nodded. He understood that her people were coming. He felt relief but also a small sadness. He had grown used to her presence in the shelter, the quiet company she brought. The next hours passed slowly. Rila prepared what little she had to bring back. Tom helped her wrap the metal pieces and small devices from her ship. He also packed food and water for the journey. The baby slept peacefully as they worked. Sometimes their hands touched by accident and both would pause, feeling the quiet bond they had formed. As night came, Rila sat near the heater, the baby in her lap. Tom sat across from her, fixing one last drone. The air between them was full of unspoken words. She wanted to thank him, to tell him that his kindness had changed her view of humans forever. But her words were too few and his language too strange. So she did the only thing she could. She took the small pendant from around her neck, a piece of crystal from her homeworld, and placed it in his hand. Tom looked surprised. She pointed to her heart and then to him. He understood it was a gift of gratitude. He tried to refuse at first, but she shook her head. He closed his fingers around it and nodded, promising silently to keep it safe. Outside, the stars began to shine. One of them was brighter than the others, moving slowly across the sky. It was the approaching Nasari rescue ship. Rila's heart filled with both joy and sorrow. She would finally return home, but leaving this place and the human who had saved her felt harder than she expected. Before sleeping, she looked at her baby's peaceful face. The child had rested in a human's arms and found calm there. That image would stay with her forever. Tom, sitting near the window, looked at the communicator and then at the mother and child resting quietly. He felt something he could not name, a mixture of pride and loneliness. The valley outside was still. The crash site had turned into a place of healing and trust. Two lives had met there by chance, and in that short time, both had learned something about the other that no story or warning could ever teach. When Rila finally closed her eyes, she whispered a soft word in her language. It meant peace. The human did not understand the word, but he smiled when he heard her voice. The stars above the valley shone brighter that night, as if they were watching and remembering the strange friendship that had begun beneath their light. The valley lay quiet beneath a pale morning sky. Rila had woken before sunrise, careful not to wake her baby. She glanced at the small basket where the child slept, wrapped in the soft blanket Tom had made. For the first time in days, she felt calm. The communicator hummed softly, a steady signal to her people. Soon they would arrive to bring her home. Rila dressed carefully, selecting the simple robes of her people. She wanted to appear strong, dignified, and grateful. The journey had been dangerous, and she could not risk showing fear. She looked toward the small shelter. Tom was still asleep near the heater, his face peaceful in the dim light. She felt a strange warmth in her chest. He had saved her and her baby without asking for anything in return. Somehow she knew she would never forget him. A sudden hum grew louder outside. The sound made Rila's pulse quicken. She stepped to the window and saw the familiar shape of her people's ship descending from the sky. Sleek and silver, it hovered above the valley, spinning slowly as if scanning the land. The Nasari were here. Relief and anxiety mixed in her heart. Soon she would be safe, but she would leave the human who had become so important to her. Tom awoke as the light of the ship reflected through the metal walls of the shelter. He rubbed his eyes and looked at Rila, who pointed outside. His gaze followed hers, landing on the hovering ship. He whistled softly in awe. Humans had seen many spacecraft in stories, but nothing prepared him for the grace of her people's vessel. Rila moved carefully to her baby, lifting the child from the basket. She held the infant close, whispering soft words in her language. Tom watched silently. Even though he could not understand the words, the tone was gentle and full of emotion. He realized this was a moment of connection, not just between a mother and her child, but between worlds that had never truly met before. The Nasari ship landed with a soft thud. The surface of the valley shook lightly and a low hum of energy filled the air. The door opened and a small team of Nasari emerged. Their eyes glowed softly and their forms shimmered in the sunlight. They were soldiers and caretakers trained to respond quickly to emergencies. Yet when they saw Rila and the humans standing together, their expressions hardened. The leader stepped forward. "Mother Rila," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Your child must come with us immediately." The human is not to interfere. Rila's heart raced. She understood the words clearly. Her people had always warned her about humans. They were dangerous and unpredictable. Yet here she stood, knowing what she had seen with her own eyes. This human had saved her life. He had cared for her baby with a tenderness no Nasari had shown before. She could not give her child to them until she knew they would understand the truth. "No," Rila said, her voice steady, but quiet. She held the baby closer. "Not yet." The leader paused, studying her. Rila's refusal surprised the team. The baby was safe, sleeping peacefully in the human's arms. Somehow the child's calmness made the human's trust seem sacred. The Nasari were not used to seeing humans behave this way. They were trained to expect fear, resistance, or aggression. Instead, they saw something completely different: peace. Tom stepped forward slowly, holding his hands out in a gesture of calm. He could not speak their language, but his eyes and posture showed respect. The Nasari looked at him suspiciously, waiting for any sign of threat. Tom did not move aggressively. He only nodded toward the child, showing that the baby was safe and loved. The leader's glowing eyes shifted back to Rila. She whispered something in her language. Rila nodded. She knew her people were arguing silently, debating whether to take the child now or wait. Finally, the leader stepped closer. "You have chosen to trust this human," she said. "We will not interfere. But know this, he will not always be here. Your people will come soon and you must decide quickly." Rila's heart ached. She had to choose. She looked at Tom, whose face was calm but full of understanding. She thought of the nights he had stayed awake while she slept. She remembered how he had held the baby when her own strength failed, and she remembered the first time she had seen her child stop crying in his arms. That moment had changed everything. She took a deep breath and held the baby toward Tom. "Stay," she said softly in her own language. "Protect," Tom understood immediately. He nodded and held the baby close. The child stirred slightly but did not wake. Tom smiled faintly, keeping his movements gentle. Rila felt a surge of gratitude. She knew she had made the right choice. The Nasari looked at the scene in silence. Their understanding grew slowly. This human was not a threat. He had proven his care through actions, not words. Slowly the leader nodded. "You may stay," she said, "but be ready to leave if the child needs to return home." Rila exhaled, a long breath she did not realize she had been holding. Relief and joy filled her chest. For the first time since the crash, she felt that the world might be safe. She knew that humans, at least this one, could be trusted. Tom spent the day preparing for their possible departure. He checked the shelter for safety and ensured the baby had everything it needed. Rila helped, offering small tools and instructions on her ship's devices. The Nasari observed quietly from the edge of the valley, ready to assist if needed. That evening, the valley was bathed in golden light. Rila watched her people from a distance while Tom sat nearby, the baby sleeping on his chest. She had learned that trust was not about words. It was about actions, patience, and care. Tom had shown her that clearly. As the sun set, the leader approached Rila. "Tomorrow we return to your world," she said. "Your human friend will remain behind. He is welcome here, but your people must come first." Rila nodded, a lump in her throat. She understood duty, responsibility, and loyalty, yet she also knew that the bond formed between her and the human was rare and valuable. She pressed her hand to her chest, silently promising to remember. That night, Rila stayed awake. She held her baby and watched Tom as he cleaned his tools and prepared food for the next day. She realized that trust had been built in small moments: a shared meal, a gentle touch, a soft word, or a careful repair of a simple machine. Each act had shown her the value of kindness even across worlds. The stars above the valley shone brighter than ever. The soft hum of the Nasari ship blended with the wind, creating a calm melody. Rila whispered a word of thanks in her language. Tom did not understand, but he heard the emotion in her voice. He smiled, and for a moment all three, Rila, her baby, and the human, felt a quiet connection that transcended their differences. The next morning arrived with a crisp chill. The Nasari ship was ready to leave. Rila dressed carefully, holding her baby close. She looked at Tom, who had cleaned the shelter and prepared food for their journey. She wanted to say something meaningful but found no words. Instead, she placed her hand on her heart and nodded. Tom nodded back. It was enough. The Nasari team approached to take her back to the ship. They moved quickly but respectfully, understanding the trust that had been built. Rila gave Tom one last glance, remembering the nights, the meals, the gentle care, and the first moment her baby had slept in his arms. She would carry that memory forever. Tom watched as Rila and her people lifted off the valley floor. The ship rose smoothly, carrying them home. The baby, still peaceful in Rila's arms, glanced briefly toward him, as if acknowledging the human who had become part of its earliest memories. When the ship disappeared into the sky, Tom remained in the valley, looking up at the stars. He felt a quiet pride and a strange sadness. He had saved 2 lives, shown care without reward, and formed a bond that crossed worlds. He knew that in some way this act of kindness had changed more than one life. It had started a bridge between 2 species. Rila, high above the valley, looked down at the world that had saved her and her child. She felt the warmth of trust, the strength of hope, and the power of compassion. Humans were not all as her people had warned. Some could be gentle, patient, and brave. One human in particular had shown her that even in a strange world, peace could be found. As the Nasari ship carried her home, Rila pressed her hand to her heart. Thinking of Tom and the small valley where everything had changed, she knew that someday her people would learn that trust and kindness could exist between humans and Nasari. That day, 2 worlds had touched in a way that could never be forgotten. The stars shone brighter as the ship moved toward the horizon. And somewhere below in the quiet valley, a human sat alone but not lonely. He had given care without expectation. He had witnessed the bond between mother and child, human and alien. He looked at the sky and smiled. knowing that one small act of kindness had crossed the boundaries of the universe.